It's time to change the conversation about mental health.
When you know something is wrong.
When you feel alone.
When you can't explain what hurts.
When every day is a struggle.
When you can't ask for help.
When your friend or family member seems fine on the outside,
but hurts on the inside.
Sometimes I feel as though I'm the only one that feels. But I know that's not true.
We can change.
We can change.
We can change.
We can make a difference.
There's power in our difference.
We can support each other.
We can fight stigma.
We say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to have a mental health condition.
We all want to feel heard.
To find hope.
And to live in a world without stigma.
Without discrimination.
And we are a force to be reckoned with.
I am not what happened to me.
I am how I overcame it.
Stand with us.
And discrimination in mental health.
You can see the person, not the condition.
You can build understanding.
You can play your part.
The conversation changes with me.
With me.
With me.
We are well-beings.
We are all well-beings.
The Well-Being Store is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, exploring healthy connections for teens, parents, and educators on the issue of mental health.
Day is long and the night is yours alone. When you're sure you've had enough of this life, hang on. Don't let yourself go. 'Cause everybody cries and everybody hurts sometimes. Sometimes everything is wrong. It's time to sing along. When your day is night, hold on, hold on. If you feel like letting go, hold on. If you feel like letting go, hold on. If you feel like letting go. WETA, with a coalition of partners, welcomes you to the Well-Being's Youth Mental Health Project. Hi, I'm Bill Pullman, and I'm honored to be with you as we launch this national campaign from public media. Well-Beings is a groundbreaking project at a very important point in time. Mental illness disproportionately affects our young people and the most disadvantaged populations among us. The growing mental health movement has set the stage for dramatic change, to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, to focus on prevention and early intervention, and the promise of more research for new treatments. Together, we can bring mental illness and discrimination out of the shadows, and it's not a day too soon. So thank you for being here today.
Welcome to the Well-Beings Tour Pittsburgh. Healthy connections, parents, teens, educators, and mental health. Today in our virtual discussion, experts and youth will explore specific tools to help parents and teens find a common ground, while offering educators guidance in recognizing signs of mental illness in students. Well-Beings, along with the public media, will produce a wide variety of content throughout the multi-year campaign. Now here are some of my fellow PBS NewsHour student reporters from around the country to tell you more about it.
The signature documentary series in the Well-Beings campaign is Ken Burns Presents Hiding in Plain Sight, Our Mental Health Crisis. Produced and directed by Ewers Brothers Productions and written by David Blistein, the film will explore, through lived experiences, the youth mental health crisis in our country. Currently in production, this 4-hour documentary film is slated to air on PBS stations in spring 2022.
Wellbeings.org and hashtag Wellbeings will be adding content every week over the 2 years, including Brave Teens, where teen storytellers go on the record about their mental health journeys.
And Brave High, a digital feature-length documentary where students in high school productions share their mental health stories through spoken word, music, and dance without fear, shame, or stigma.
Out of the Dark, a short-form digital series that will profile lives transformed by mental health challenges, highlighting the power of difference.
PBS NewsHour's student reporting labs engage high school journalism students as correspondents that report on youth mental health from more than 150 high schools across 46 states.
Hello, I'm Beth Dolinar, joining you from Pittsburgh and WQED. Thank you for joining us for this live stream event as part of the national PBS Well-Beings Tour on Youth Mental Health. It was created by WETA, the public media station in Washington, D.C., in partnership with member stations, including WQED. We thank the many national and local partners across the region and the country. The Well-Beings campaign addresses the critical health needs in America through broadcast content, original digital content, and impactful local events. The campaign begins with the Youth Mental Health Project, engaging young voices to create a national conversation to raise awareness, address stigma and discrimination, and to encourage compassion. Teens tell us that life for them is rife with stress and anxiety and depression. Our program today will explore a challenge that will be familiar to many of us, and that is the generation and the understanding gap that often comes between teens and their parents. It's a communication disconnect that can make the stressors of adolescent life even more troublesome and can delay or even impede the ability of teens to receive the help that they need. We'll be talking about that gap from both sides of the equation, and we'll be exploring ways to improve communication between parents and their teens. Feel free to join the discussion. We invite you to share your questions and comments on the Well-Beings Facebook page and YouTube page. Let's start out, though, by introducing our panelists. Lem Gamble is a college music major whose own adolescent years were made more difficult because of struggles with mental health. Welcome, Lemlin. Why is it important for you to be here today?
It's important for me to be here today because I think it's really important that a lot of learning comes from understanding, and sharing my experience can help someone understand what I went through and maybe impact one person's life out there who's going through what I am right now.
Thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing more from you soon. Elle Snyder is a high school senior just back from a college visit, and she has worked to raise awareness of mental health challenges among her peers. Elle, I know this is an important topic for you.
Yes, it is. I've been working to help educate students on mental health for my entire high school career. And I think it's so important that this is a conversation that is had in every teen's life. Healthy parent and teen relationships have a huge impact on mental health. So bridging the gaps between us could help so many people.
Thanks, Elle. We'll be hearing from you and your friends and your mom in just a little while. Nicholas Amy is a mental health advocate with NAMI. He speaks publicly on the power of peer support, and he shares the story of his own journey through a battle with mental illness. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I have lived through everything I thought I couldn't and got the help that I needed, and now work in the field to help people not have such a difficult time as I did. People like Lem and everybody here who's watching and tuning in.
We look forward to talking to you more and learning more about your experiences. And Michelle Decker is the Young Adult Outreach and Education Specialist at NAMI, Keystone, Pennsylvania. Michelle uses her lived experiences to help spread awareness and stop the spread of the stigma around mental health. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So with NAMI Keystone, we use our educational programs to go into the schools and work with the students and the teachers. And we are able to see how important mental health education can be, and how important the message of being able to speak out about how you're feeling, especially at that middle school and high school age. And the connection of I've been there and you are not alone is just something that is so crucial when it comes to sharing this kind of story, as it can break down barriers and really just start conversations that may not have been there before. So I'm just really glad to be here, and really happy to be able to be part of this conversation.
We're happy to. Thanks, Michelle. And we'll be hearing more from all of our panelists throughout the program. We'd also like to know what you think of this program. So if you're able to, you can fill out the survey and let us know, complete the survey. Let's begin, though, with the stories of young people who tell us that their parents just don't get it. These students are finding comfort and support by reaching out to their peers, and also by asking their parents to try to understand what it is like to be a teenager these days.
I kind of had my first realization when I was around 13, and I realized things were harder for me than it was for other people. I had a lot of sleep issues. I thought, I was just a hyper kid, but I definitely had the startings of insomnia that really started to affect my education. I would get sad a lot. I'd have a lot of trouble focusing and a lot of negative thoughts.
Lem Gamble is in a much better place now, a third-year college student studying music, playing on the lacrosse team, and finally able to put her difficult adolescence into perspective. She says her struggles back then were made worse by a parent who did not understand.
He didn't understand that my brain was working against me. He took it more as I wasn't applying myself. He took it more as I needed to heal myself with the power of positive thinking, and he put that on me.
That's one of the things that I hear when I'm working with adolescents, is they'll say, well, my mom doesn't understand, or my dad doesn't care.
Dr. Charma Dudley treats teens with mental illness, a serious health problem that's more common than you may think. 1 in 6 children has a mental health condition. The numbers can be higher among African Americans.
Black people in general have been exposed to trauma in America. So when these teenagers are seeing images of Black people dying by the hands of police or being treated unfairly in this country, it creates even more anxiety and depression.
Anxiety and depression are common among all populations. Other conditions widespread among teens include attention deficit, eating, stress, and obsessive-compulsive and post-trauma disorders. All can be treated with therapy and, in some cases, medication. But too often, the generation gap stands in the way.
There are parents that say, kids will be kids, suck it up, it's not that bad. I had to deal with that when I was a kid.
A lot of my mental health issues make me feel like I'm being dramatic.
That is something where there's a gap between parents and kids having really good conversations about stuff like that.
I just don't think they get it.
That generation gap is an ongoing topic of conversation when Amber Siri and 5 of her high school classmates get together each week or so.
We started something that we like to call Therapy Thursday about 2 years ago, and it really just started one day because one of us was upset about something that had happened that day, and so we all met up after school just to talk about our lives and what was really going on with each of us.
The friends say that even if none of them ever is diagnosed with a mental health condition, their everyday stresses are troubling enough to benefit from the meetings.
It's let me open up and get my emotions out and just let them know how I'm feeling.
The topics run the gamut, with one main culprit in that troublesome gap between parents and teens.
I think the biggest difference between our generation and theirs is social media, because social media sets so many standards that they did not have as teenagers.
It's such an unrealistic expectation for what we're supposed to be and what we have to be if we want to be successful in a world like today. I wish my parents would stop saying it's not that big of a deal, you'll get over it, social media is stupid. Like, yeah, we know that.
So while I do feel that parents do relate, and they do try to sympathize and understand, I think it is just different because, we have to grow up and kind of find ourselves while also being led by social media.
The friends share the same struggles: worries about college, anxiety about the pandemic, sleepless nights before tests in school.
I wish my mom or dad would say to me that I'm not alone in my struggle, because I think a lot of the time I think that whenever I'm having anxieties or whenever I think I'm not enough or that I'm not going to succeed.
It would be helpful if my mom said to me something along the lines of, if you mess up, it's okay. I know that they love us so much. We all have really great parents, but it is tough because it's just something that they never had to grow up with.
It is a full-time job connecting with your kids and checking in, giving a health check.
Elle is second oldest of Elle Snyder's 4 children. Elle acknowledges how generations sometimes struggle to reach each other and maintain this critical connection.
Often it's a misunderstanding, but sometimes, the joke is when your kid turns 13, they just go to their room and shut their door. I just think, sometimes they don't want to share information with us. They're not ready to.
They were able to just live and make mistakes and feel okay about making mistakes because mistakes are good. And that's what's so hard about our generation, is that mistakes aren't good anymore. And it's really tough to deal with the anxiety that we all feel.
Why are these kids depressed? Why are they so stressed out? Why is our suicide rate skyrocketing? Because they're terrified of stuff.
I've gotten very hurtful things posted about me or sent to me in a video clip
just going on about rude things that had nothing to even do about the person that I was, but about how they felt I looked. And this is what I always try to tell my parents. They say, in the big scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And I say, it sucks so much, and I know it doesn't matter, and in 10 years I'm not going to care about it. But I'm in high school now, and in high school right now, in this moment, it does matter.
But it takes these conversations, and this is why I'm sitting here having this conversation, because more parents like me have to be able to say, this is hard, right? These are hard conversations.
Every parent wants their kid to be okay, but it's that parent's job to recognize when they're not okay. And sometimes even with teenagers, you have to be the one that says, I don't care how old you are, we're going to make an appointment.
Lem reached out for help, and now through therapy and medicine, she's thriving. She's come to understand what many parents don't, that mental illness is as real as any physical illness and deserves the same attention without blame.
If you think of it more like, how would I treat a person who injured their arm or sprained their wrist or sprained their ankle? Would I tell them to just get over it and walk up the stairs? No, I'd give them time to heal. And that tends to put it in a different light, different perspective for people, and help them be a little bit more understanding. Because, if your leg's broken, if your brain's broken, either way, it's going to affect every part of your life.
Well, Lem, we are so glad you shared your story. And I'd like to ask you, how could things have been better back when you were 13, 14, 15, and first noticing that you were having problems? What might have helped?
I think that having a support system where I was listened to would have helped a lot. It took a lot for me to be comfortable and open up to people. And it started mostly with my friends, but it's because they waited for me to share and didn't push and said that they noticed that things were wrong, but they were just here to help whenever I wanted to talk to them about it. And that made me feel comfortable enough. So if the adult figures in my life did that, instead of being a little bit more aggressive about it, or writing things off as oh, I'm just being lazy, or I'm just being, I'm not trying hard enough, then that would have encouraged me to say, yeah, I'm going through something, I definitely need assistance.
We have a question from Facebook, and it's a good one. Is there anything that teachers or counselors at school might have done differently to make those years easier for you?
I definitely think there's a lot that could have been done from my teachers and the mental health people in the schools. There wasn't really a sense of mental health being important. I went to kind of a private school, and so the focus was more on tests and homework and essays, and all of that was put first, and being in a bunch of extracurriculars. But whenever a student was clearly struggling, it wasn't really seen as a priority. And so a lot of kids were afraid to reach out, or were scared that if they did, it would go really badly and they would be seen as stupid. So if there was more of a sense of, we're here for you and we want to hear how we can help make this better, that would encourage more students to, find the help that they need.
Elle, it's been exactly 1 year today and tomorrow for most of us when the pandemic shut the world down. And I know that happened for us at our offices and our parents, your parents, but also at school. So what has this COVID year been like with that layer of isolation and virtual school on top of the stresses that already were there before?
Yeah, for sure. A big part of being able to cope with mental health issues is having social connections, because it's the way that we are able to start those conversations, like Nami always says. And that made things really tough on teens, because as humans, we're meant to be social. And along with that, then social media took over and became even bigger than it already was. And it was kind of our only form of communication for so long. And, not only that, but I think it was also really difficult for parents and teens to be stuck together for so long in those relationships. And, parents not really understanding the social media aspect of our lives at that point. So there was a ton of things that made life a lot harder for teens in the past year.
And Elle, parents, as you noted in our taped piece, say it doesn't matter, it's not going to matter a couple of years from now. And I guess we as parents wonder, can you get away from social media? Is that even a practical consideration for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A lot of my girlfriends and I have, talked about, been back and forth about going off of social media and trying to do these things and going on these cleanses. And, each of us have tried little things like getting rid of our Snapchats or our Instagrams. And in reality, it's so tough because it's not just social connections that are through those things. It's all of life now. It's something that it's becoming necessary, not just like, if you want it, you can use social media. It's something that's more like you kind of need to have it for a lot of things, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, I understand that. You really would feel like you're not part of the community without it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, you go into schools and you work with middle schoolers and high schoolers around the topic of opening discussion of mental illness and mental health. And I'm wondering if you have looked beyond this COVID year and all of its many stresses, and are you wondering what are you going to be seeing in youngsters as we start to move back into real life? Was there trauma from this? Will there be more stresses, anxiety, and so on? What do you think?
I think it's shocking to me that we haven't discussed this more, and that it's kind of just now on our, coming to the fore. It's as adults having to be inside for this long, having to be near each other, and for young people, what I am hearing quite a bit in our teen support groups, in the presentations that we do in schools, is that kids have never, and teens have never been so exposed to the family dynamics, to having to learn like this. There is so much that we are going to need to talk about. With all the time that we've had, we've had a lot of time to explore our thoughts and feelings and emotions, and what it does to us to be, not connected to everybody and only connected by social media is not the same thing as a human being wired for physical human connection, to be able to just see somebody. There's something that human touch does to other people, that being prevented from seeing each other and interacting has a huge detrimental effect on our mental health. So reconnecting, there's a lot of kids who are just as afraid of going back to whatever normal is, as they are of continuing on as we are right now in a virtual world.
And I'm wondering, when we talk about families being stuck inside together, for a lack of a better way to put it, you would think, wow, this is rich ground for connection and discussion, but it probably didn't work out that way, has it, Nick?
No, it really hasn't. And the one thing I really wish is that human beings, no matter the age, no matter the role, parent, teacher, young adult, kid, teen, could connect on the fact that we all struggle. And I think what's happened that led to a lack of connection throughout this pandemic is that we are all just trying to get through it. And where you'd think, a lot of us would come together, I think a lot of us have just been trying to get through it. And, it's easy to isolate yourself when you're trying to deal with something and cut off the connection so that you can gain what you need from your personal space to deal with what you've got to go through. But it's a little bit more difficult to be vulnerable. And Brene Brown, who is a doctor, says that's our greatest form of courage, is to be vulnerable and talk about what's going on. It's not the easiest thing, but it's very helpful.
For sure. Michelle, I heard through the research for this program that young people in their 20s and younger, so certainly teenagers, don't have the hangups or the stigma about talking about mental health. Has that been what you've found as you have worked with students?
Well, I think it definitely depends on just a lot of factors. I've definitely seen that Generation Z is a lot more open to talking about their mental health and how they're feeling, but there's still a big block. When we go in to do these programs, Ending the Silence and in our own voice, as we're sharing our stories, there will be students who won't come up and talk to us unless their friends are gone, because they don't want their friends to know that they're experiencing any kind of problems, that they're going through anything. So they still have that kind of stigma of, I'm ashamed that I'm feeling this way. But then on the flip side of that, because of social media, people are seeing everyone sharing their stories and talking about this so much that the stigma is breaking down a lot more. So yes, I'm seeing that the kids are talking about it a lot more, but the stigma's still there. So we have to really work on breaking it down. And that's why the programs are so great, because we get to go in and talk to them and see where we still need to push those boundaries.
Elle, do you agree with her? Are your classmates more open to talking about it without judgment or blame, do you think?
I think that people are more open to talking about the subject in a more broad way, but when it becomes individualized and it starts to be about them personally and whether they have a problem, people still kind of feel like ashamed, like it's this horrible thing that they have some sort of, they're going through something, or they have some sort of mental illness,
So based on the work you've done with NAMI and your Therapy Thursdays, how do we get over that hurdle to the point where it's not just generally acceptable to talk about it, but that anybody can say it safely?
I think that it's important, just as Nami says, to start the conversation. The number one thing that I've been doing for the past couple of years is just trying to start the conversation at schools, because, how Lemlem said before, that schools are so focused on academics and athletics, but sometimes they should, take a step back and think about, the mental health parts of students' lives, because they have classes for a physical wellness education, and there's nothing really for a mental health education. And, counselors, students can go to them for help, but sometimes students just need to be given the information and not just have to decide on their own to go get that help, because sometimes that's just too hard for a student to decide that, that they want to go to a counselor or something like that.
Lem, you made the transition from high school to college a couple of years ago. Have you found the landscape there different as far as your ability to openly talk about yourself to both your friends and also, as necessary, to guidance counselors or other people on the faculty?
Well, whenever I went to college, it did become easier for me to talk about things. And that was the time that I got the push to finally get a therapist. And mainly that was because I was all by myself in an unfamiliar environment. And I didn't know anyone, and I couldn't talk about it with my friends because all my friends were back home. So it at first was really isolating, and I had to, find an outlet to talk about it. And then I started making really good friends, and I started being introduced to a wider diverse group of people because, people are coming from all over America. And I found that I have a lot more shared experiences with the more people that I get to know, the more I have a better understanding of my mental health, and the more comfortable I get with them, the easier it is to talk about it. And, especially though, the most noticeable part is whenever you email a teacher and you're like, hey, my mental health is not doing well right now. I think I might need an extension. I haven't been sleeping. They'll be like, okay, we can talk about it if you want and what I can do in the future to, make that a little bit easier on you. And that's not something I really had in high school. So it's really nice to have a bit of a support system, even from people who you've only been in their class for 2 weeks.
We have a question from YouTube, and it's a good one. How can a teenager connect with one of the support groups? And I think that's a question for Nick. Take it.
Sure. Well, NAMI as a whole is a national organization, and each of us as affiliates and state organizations have these support groups. So our national website is NAMI.org, and a website like ours for NAMI Bucks County is NAMIBucksPA.org. And the groups are brave spaces, we call them, and they're shared strength groups. So they do require registration to keep it protected. And so we know who's coming. So you go to our website, which you can find, ours is NAMIBucksPA.org. We have NAMIKeystonePennsylvania.org and NAMI.org. And each of these affiliates have their own support groups, depending on where you are. So that would be a great way to start, is on our website. And anyone is welcome. All of our programs are free.
Great. WQED has a long history of reporting on mental health topics. And one of our most recent documentaries was titled Before Stage 4. It explored the importance of recognizing the early signs of mental illness in young people before it reaches a crisis state. And I caught up recently with Paul Gianfrido, who he and his son Timothy were featured in that documentary. We appreciate you being with us very much. And I guess a place to begin would be to extend our sympathies for the loss of Tim. And I'd like to go back to when was it first evident to you that he was having some mental health struggles?
Well, first of all, just thank you for doing this, and thank you for your sympathy and condolences. It's been a difficult few weeks for us. But it really was the culmination of 30 years of Tim dealing with what was not diagnosed as schizophrenia until he was a teenager, but really at the age of 5. It was pretty clear to us that there was something going on with Tim. And frankly, it was clear to his teacher in kindergarten, his siblings, his friends, and to Tim himself, that he just didn't have the same thoughts that other children did and didn't feel the same way that other children did and needed some help. But it wasn't until Tim was 10 years old when he finally began to get specific mental health care and support from both a child psychiatrist and a child psychologist.
Somewhere on the streets of San Francisco, a young man named Tim walks among the homeless. While in this boardroom, overlooking our nation's capital. His father watches the horizon and wonders.
As you think back, are you able to understand how some parents now who are going through similar struggles with their children want so much for their children to be okay? And that in some way can be impeding getting care because you really want it not to be anything serious.
Yeah, I mean, none of us, want these things to be serious. We're all hoping for good news. And I think one of the challenges that I had as a parent was that I had a level of expectation, I think, about what should be normal that proved to be unrealistic. And it wasn't that uh, anything was done wrong, anything was done incorrectly, or even that my expectations were wrong or incorrect. It was just that I wanted to make certain that my son had every opportunity to be nurtured, to grow, to develop, to do the kinds of things that he wanted to do with his life, even from early stages, and to live a happy life. And I wanted to live one too. And sometimes it gets in the way of that when what you're staring at is a bunch of people who you think may be judging you as a parent when your child shows behavioral health symptoms, maybe judging your child. Both those things happen, and they happen frequently. Maybe discriminating against him or discriminating against you. And so you're reluctant to share openly all of what's going on.
We have talked to many teenagers and parents who say that because of the generational differences, that parents still have a tendency to say, snap out of it, you're overreacting, you're being dramatic. What would you say, first of all, to parents who maybe come very honestly by that mindset because maybe the way they were raised?
I would just say to parents that, I had the sad misfortune of having an adult daughter who died from metastatic breast cancer. And I never once told her, or even thought, you needed to get over this, Larissa, in any way. And sometimes I had to catch myself, in Tim's bad moments and difficult moments, and not saying to Tim, well, Tim, you just have to get over this. I mean, he was dealing with schizophrenia. It's a real thing. And it's a really challenging thing to have to deal with. And so the more we can understand that it's just not the same.
Let's go to the other side of the equation. What would you say to teenagers who say, I wish my parents would. They don't get it. I feel so much stress and I wish they would cut me a break.
Yeah, just be patient. Same thing. I mean, for teens, it's that, yeah, they don't understand right away. They don't remember right away. They've got all kinds of other things they've been worrying about too. And they're worrying about you. They want you to be well, they want you to be healthy, but most importantly, they want you to be able to achieve whatever it is, your goals and objectives are. But honestly, so much of this system that we have pits parents and children against, each other. And really, it's a time to band together and recognize you're going to draw strength, each of you from the other. Or you can go down an alternative path and just create frustration and tear each other down. And honestly, you're the two people who love each other the most. So may as well draw strength rather than weakness from that relationship.
And so Paul Gianfrido and his wife make one more trip to San Francisco, and with the help of Tim's case manager, Paul is about to have a reunion with the 31-year-old son he hasn't seen in 4 years.
I would just say to parents, don't. I mean, no matter how many things you feel have gone wrong or how many things you feel you could have done differently to this point, how much you feel like you're responsible for the way your child is behaving or the way your child is being perceived, just understand that all of that is worth setting aside, and try to understand that, your child is alive right now because of you. And even on the worst of days, even on the crisis days, these still can be good days, and we should live with hope, not despair. And we should live, rejoicing in the kinds of things that we've done to help raise our children and to do the best we can by them, as opposed to blaming ourselves for any of the things that may have gone wrong. There's a way to look at it from the perspective of always having hope, and that's the way I always try to look at this. I always had hope, and as a result, I think Timothy had 35 relatively happy years.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your experience with Tim. And again, we extend our feelings for you and your family for his loss, and your daughter too. And we all feel hopeful moving forward. And I think programs like this certainly are helping.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for doing this, and certainly in concert with that, and the panel that it looks like you've put together. I'm sure there'd just be such tremendous insights for the people who participate and view it. So I really appreciate this. It makes a huge difference.
It's such important work that Paul is doing. And I wanted to ask Nick if this story that Paul shared about Timothy, I think it maybe rings a bell for you, resonates with you. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your own journey?
Sure. And to give you a little bit more hope, Timothy's diagnosis, which that's my brother's name as well, is very similar to mine. I live with schizoaffective disorder, and I very well could have gone down a similar path with homelessness. In fact, I did. I have, when I say lived through the most difficult things that I could possibly think of, the toughest times in my life, I lived through them, but barely. I went through bullying in school. Everything started for me in school when I was young, same as Tim. And I struggled to understand it just like everyone else does. And it was in that struggle that I learned to cope in negative ways with, sometimes drugs and alcohol. Sometimes the only means of control I had in my life was by restricting eating, developing an eating disorder. And getting to, high school where you want from your parents protection and approval, and you want from your friends in school acceptance. You want to be accepted. I struggled with that, and I tried my best to fit in, even though my brain was different. I love the way that Lemlem describes it. It's just my brain was working against me, and I never fit in, and got through college and everything. And then when I made it out into the world and I faced some real difficulties with my mom passing away, is when I realized that I was not equipped to deal with my own mental health, the way my brain worked, getting through grief and loss and trauma. And that was when I had my very first suicide attempt. And it's a very real thing to not be sure whether you can do this or not. And that's why I really think it's so important that, Elle especially, and NAMI, with Michelle going into the schools too, are starting the conversations, because there's nothing like getting not only acceptance, but to have a conversation with your peers about this stuff. That Therapy Thursday, kudos to you for that. That's the coolest thing. I wish I had something like that in school. But that's really what I would have loved, is for someone else to have said, you know what, Nick, you're not the only one who feels that way. You're not the only one who struggles.
I think one of the myths about suicidal ideation is that if you say it or ask your teen, are you thinking of this, that you are encouraging it in some way, or at least planting the idea. And that is not the case, is it, Nick?
No, it's been proven that as long as we're talking about it, someone is less likely to bottle it up, keep it inside. Maybe it manifests into a plan and finding means to end your life. In fact, as we're talking about it, it removes the stigma. It takes away the taboo nature of suicide, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're the absolute only person in the world who's ever had a thought like this. And the reaction of other people when you talk about it is just as important. To say, thank you for telling me something like that. It is difficult. I've struggled, to hear that kind of a response, and to hear from someone else that there is help for that. And it's not as scary as you think. It's not like it is on TV. But there are solutions to take you through that, and you can come out on the other side and live a full and productive life. That is so important to know.
Michelle, I'm wondering what you hear from parents when you open this discussion with them, because there is still shame involved beyond stigma. I think there is some shame, and also the old tradition of what happens in this house stays in this house, and we don't tell anybody else. We deal with it ourselves. And I'm guessing, Michelle, that you encounter some of that.
Yes. And I think it's especially in, I want to say, my parents' generation. So kind of 60s-ish. So right in there, it's very, we never dealt with this as parents or as kids. They're very buckle up by the bootstraps. And so when they see that this is more of a conversation now, it's very surprising to them. I know my parents are struggling with it. My mom is dealing with her mental health now, and it's very hard for her to talk about because she's not used to having these conversations. When we go into schools, the teachers afterwards will be like, this was wonderful. We never had anything like this when we were in school. They want to know more. They want to have more information. The guidance counselors want to know more. We almost get more interactions from the adults than we do the students, because they're just so excited to talk about it. But they're also, I would say, astonished is the word, because they're so astonished, I'm going to use it again, to see how openly we're able to share our stories and speak about it. And it's because that they're so used to not being all hush-hush about it. And so I think with parents and teachers and counselors just learning to open up, it's as important to start the conversations with them as it is the students.
And Nick, you have a program called Say It Out Loud, right? Is that what it's called? And tell me how that works. And it almost seems like you are breaking a wall down, and then things get better the moment you say the words.
Mm-hmm. It's similar to Ending the Silence, and it's a program where we come in, talk about the basics of mental health, what it is, what happens if you seek treatment, and we give you our stories of lived experience and show you that we are people who have made it all the way through to find recovery, and that recovery is an ongoing process. I'll never be recovered, but I live in recovery, and sometimes just a choice of doing the next right thing. And we then ask the students how they're feeling, and we open up the discussion almost like a support group in schools, and we get invited back week after week to continue the conversation, check in with people, because as someone who's just exposed to mental health and what it is, and teachers, can be overwhelmed. You have 30 kids in a class. To have that discussion, one-on-one with every student is a lot. So we come in and do that. And we check in on those things like, being worried about your parents fighting. Money is always a concern. I mean, for kids, there's food insecurity with students. And for kids to be able to talk about that with someone that isn't their parent, that isn't their, a friend in school who might judge them for something like that. And we have kids that talk anonymously with us too. Just to get it out, to say it out loud, to say, I am afraid to leave the house sometimes. I have panic attacks. I struggle with anxiety. I have an eating disorder. Or how do I know if I have any of that? It starts the conversation, and that's what we need.
Elle, you mentioned in our taped piece that it's not okay to make mistakes anymore. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
Yeah, so a lot of the time with social media now, everything is filmed, or, there's documents of everything that happens in our lives. And so where you could feel free to make mistakes and know that it would never go anywhere, or you couldn't get, canceled, as they say on social media now, for making a mistake in your life. I think that would be nicer for people or teens to know that it's okay to make mistakes, and that's part of life and part of growing as a person, is being able to make mistakes and grow from them. And that's what makes you a better person.
And everybody has a camera,
Mm-hmm.
which plays into the same thing. And Lem, I wanted to ask you, I know that there was a lot of trial and error early on in your treatment until you found the right psychologist, the right therapist for you. But when you finally did, describe what it was like to sit in there and what happened in that first meeting where you felt you were being heard the first time.
Well, whenever I found my first therapist, I actually met with 2 therapists at the same time. I met with one first, and then later in the day I had another one. And I talked to the first person, and he seemed kind of uncomfortable whenever I'd bring things up, because I'm a little bit of an oversharer. So I'd be like, yeah, I have this trauma. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And I didn't feel encouraged to keep talking about it and unpack it. But then I met with this second therapist, and I would talk about it, and she'd be like, oh yeah, that sucks. Okay. And jot it down and remembered it later and be like, yeah, I remember you mentioning this. Let's talk about it. And I felt like I was being heard. I didn't feel uncomfortable talking about the bad things that happened in my life, or the rough experiences that I had in my life. And a lot of it that did help, at least for me, because I am a woman, I felt more comfortable talking to a woman, because I could say things and not have to explain it. I could be I could talk about sexism and she would understand firsthand way. And I could also talk about my experiences as a Black woman, and she was also a Black woman, and she could be absolutely, I know exactly how that feels. And it would take half of the explanations and me feeling I have to justify myself away. And it helped me open up more and more, because I was like, oh my God, you get it. You understand how I'm feeling. And she also opened up a little bit to me about the things that she went through, because her parents are also African. So we were yeah, they do this. And she was like, yeah, I've actually experienced that. Here's how I dealt with it. And I felt so much more comfortable expressing myself when I knew that like I was going to be heard and understood and like we could work through this together.
And Nick, I think that is a key point here. You had mentioned when we spoke privately that people who have not had an experience with psychotherapy or a psychologist or mental health treatment think that it's this awful, terrible, difficult, shameful, embarrassing thing. And that's not what it is it?
No, or a crutch, or my dad used to think of it almost as something that was, as we would say now, bougie, something beyond us. And it really isn't. And if, I hope that this is the generation that starts viewing mental health as being just as important as physical health. And it's funny because your mental health affects everything in your life, and everything in your life affects your mental health. So wouldn't it make sense that you have a psychotherapist to talk to? And when you do, it's helpful for everybody to know that mental health treatment, psychotherapy, seeing a psychiatrist, is not like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. It's not like, the things that we've seen in movies. It's an essential for someone who questions their own thoughts, who questions their abilities, who deals with, not necessarily mental illness, but mental health struggles. Therapy is for everyone.
Michelle, when you are working with students, can you talk about what the most common concerns are that you hear in your sessions?
Absolutely. I think definitely because we talk with classrooms and students, that anxiety is definitely something that comes up most often. Questions about, is this normal? Is this just stress? Things like that. And most of our speakers talk about the onset of their mental health issues, and it's usually during the young ages, the middle school, the high school ages. And so the students will come up and they'll talk about their own experiences. And sometimes the students, they just want to share their own experiences. They want to be heard. And, being there and being someone for them to talk to is just great. It's a great experience. And, sometimes they can't talk to the parents. And so if we can be that person for them, I think that's a great thing.
We hope this important discussion has inspired you to share your story. You can do that on the Wellbeing Story Wall, and here's how you can be part of the conversation.
The We Are Wellbeing's Story Wall is a central part of the wellbeings.org website, social media platform, and the Wellbeings National Tour. We are asking the public of all ages to submit personal reflections, videos, photos, and short stories to offer hope, to foster understanding, to build community, and break down stigma.
What does being well mean to you? What is the one thing you wish people knew about mental health? What is your passion? What's your story?
Video can easily be submitted via social media using the hashtag #wellbeings or emailed to info@wellbeings.org.
Stories can also be submitted by uploading to Dropbox and live at Wellbeings Tour events. The We Are Wellbeing Story Wall is made possible through generous support provided by Wellbeing's Youth Mental Health Project founding corporate sponsor Otska and Wellbeing's media partner People.
WQED, along with Wellbeings, has created a resource toolkit for you or someone you care about to find mental health resources, both nationally and right here in our greater Pittsburgh community. This mental health resource toolkit can be found at www.wellbeings.org/WQED-resources.
Aside from COVID and our being separated from each other, this last year has been one of turmoil with the political climate and the election. And we have a question from Facebook that addresses that. And I think, Nick, you might be able to answer. Is it any wonder we're all anxious, that we all are feeling anxiety right now?
I don't think it's any wonder. And we in the field saw it coming. We knew that human beings are wired for connection. And no, it's no wonder that we are. And that's why we needed to adapt. And we did adapt by placing all of our programs online so that we could be physically distanced, but socially connected. So all of the support programs that we offer are online now. And what we have found is that the one thing that has really helped is for people to come together and discuss that. So we've been separated, but one of the good things about this pandemic was seeing everyone come together and talk about a common struggle and then come to common hope in that. So no, I'm not surprised that everyone is struggling, but I am pleasantly surprised to see how much hope has come from it.
Lem, what do you have to say about that?
I think that a lot of the stuff that's happened recently, especially with like the political climate and all like the social justice movements that have been more brought to light, has really impacted me personally because, you know, it's hard seeing people who look like you in difficult situations. Like that really hurts. And I know a lot of Black people that I've talked to personally have said that they're also really struggling seeing like that violence, and it's so spread everywhere that it's hard to escape it. And sometimes you very much so do need to take a social media break just to get away from all of it, because it can be really detrimental. But for some of us, we're like, yeah, this is kind of like a small example of the stuff that we see like every single day. A lot of people see these things firsthand. A lot of people are, you know, in the neighborhood whenever stuff like this happens. And so they're like, this is par for the course. And so while like a lot more people are seeing it and being exposed to it, and it can be really detrimental to your mental health, it's also important to realize like this has been happening for so long, it just hasn't been televised. And imagine what people are going through seeing this on a daily basis, knowing it's happening and not knowing how to like express it because no one else really knows, because social media wasn't big back in the day.
And if I can follow up, Lem, and ask, what do you personally do? What have you done over the past year to either address your own anxiety about this that has been long-standing, or that maybe moves the discussion forward?
I think that for me, it's really helped reaching out to people who experience the same emotions. I have a really close friend, and sometimes I can just text her and be like, did you see this? This really sucks. Like, it's making me really upset. And knowing that she's sharing the same feelings and that she's always going to be here for me and I can always talk to her about it, that gives me, you know, a little bit of a safety net. And talking to like my mom about it a lot, because she's also always like super nervous about me like going out by myself and at night. And my dad's always super nervous about me like going the speed limit and stuff. Understanding that my anxiety is shared in my community also helps. It's reassuring to know that I'm not, you know, out of my mind for being scared. I have a lot of people who are sharing the emotions with me, and I can get through it with their help. Like, we're in this together. And, you know, everyone can find some type of support system if they look like, and that's what helps people get through, you know?
Yes. And Elle, if you were to demonstrate for us how you would open a conversation with your mom or your dad about some mental health problem that you are just now beginning to experience, what would you say to open the conversation?
Yeah, well, usually with my personality, I'd keep to myself for a while, but eventually, usually I bring up stuff to my parents kind of just in conversation. Like, it won't be me coming to them knowing that I want to bring it up. Usually it's just we're having a conversation, and it is a perfect time to bring something up like that I'm not doing well at the moment, or I'm struggling mentally with something specific. I think that's usually when I tend to bring things up to them, just in an opportunity where we're having a good conversation that it can comfortably flow into.
I think we all are aware that one of the most famous women on the planet revealed in a interview on Sunday night that she had thought about taking her own life, that being Meghan Markle. And I'm wondering, Michelle, how it helps to break down stigma when you have a very famous person who says the words.
Well, I think definitely just knowing that there are people in that kind of position that go through it, that they can be so privileged. I mean, she's an actress. She has so much money in her own right. And then she marries into the royal family. I mean, separating from all of those issues, she's married to Prince Harry. He supports her so much. But then she's going through all those issues. You see someone in that position and you realize that they can still have these kind of problems. I think you see that and you realize, well, this can affect anyone. It's not just, for someone who's in a really down and out situation or whatever have you. It's breaking down stigma because anyone can experience this. And it's so important to speak about it. And I also think it's important to see the social media reactions, because you have people that are very supportive, but then you have the people on the other side of that. And you realize that, Meghan Markle isn't going to see your reactions saying you don't believe her or whatever, but your friend who's feeling the same way may see that, and you need to realize that, watch what you say, because you may not know how your friends are feeling, but they're going to see those reactions. So double-edged sword with social media, but I think it helps break down the stigma because you can talk about it.
Yes. And Nick, what should a parent do who has never been faced with a mental health challenge in a child and hears from the child, something's not right, I'm not doing well, I'm not sleeping, I'm worried, I'm sad. What would you tell the parent to do first?
Mm-hmm. Of course, it's going to be scary to hear that your child is struggling, just as it would be if your child came to you, as Lem said, with a broken arm. It's an emergency. And so to educate yourself a little ahead of time on the ways in which mental health works and what resources are available, reach out to an organization like NAMI for some education, but to be prepared so that when your child comes to you with this really vulnerable situation, you don't gasp or you don't panic, because they're looking for you to know what to do. They want security in a very insecure situation. So to say to them, listen, you're telling me that you are struggling or that you are having thoughts of suicide. Thank you for sharing that with me. And thank you for having the courage. I know what it's like to struggle. I have been through struggle myself. Maybe I don't know exactly what it's like, but here is what we can do. And there are treatment options in the community. There is therapy, there are groups, there are support groups. And if you really don't know what to do, just reach out to a place like NAMI, where we have helplines and people like me, like Michelle, who can help to guide you through it, to calm you down, because it is scary. You don't want anything bad to happen to your child, but just to stay calm and know that we're there for you too. And there are solutions to help guide you through these things. They're not equally accessible to everyone, which is important to know too. You need some help with that. There are disparities in the system, but there are ways to break these barriers to get the help that you need, and that things will be okay.
The schools do not have the staffing for this to really be effective in the way that they need to be, do they?
I wish I could say that they did. It is an absolute truth that some of the schools that we go into with programs like Ending the Silence, as great as they are to start the conversation, there have been instances where we're not invited back into the school because there isn't adequate means to handle kids that need to talk about their thoughts and feelings and emotions. But there are things that teachers can do on an individual basis. It's similar to what I just said about the parents. It's don't keep it hidden that you're a teacher and you have thoughts and feelings and emotions, and that you don't know what to do all the time. Because as Elle was saying, people are so scared to make a mistake and not know what to do, but none of us know what we're doing. If we're honest, none of us really know what we're doing. And if we can all admit that and just come to a place of we'll breathe together, and they can reach out to us if they need to, but just keeping it real in terms of that we all struggle, and making it okay to have that conversation. For Ending the Silence, we have these little signs that teachers can hang up on their doors, letting kids know that it's a safe space for them to come and talk. That they just say, "How are you doing?" and come and talk to me. And that's sometimes what people need, not necessarily resources or advice or an intervention. People just need to talk.
And a kind ear helps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're all familiar with the excellent work of documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, and he is now turning his camera to the topic of mental health in a film called Hiding in Plain Sight. The film will look at the experiences of young people who are living with mental health conditions, with a focus on the importance of awareness and compassion. The film will shine a light on the challenges facing these young people, their parents, their teachers, friends, and healthcare workers. The documentary will air a year from now in spring of 2022, but we are pleased to show you a preview now.
I think there's so many things you can say about mental illness. It comes out of nowhere, and then it just creeps into your body, and you don't know how to deal with it.
It's a strange thing to look back on and think to myself, I really didn't care about anything at that point. Not caring if I wake up.
It became a very frustrating thing whenever I'd look in the mirror and there's nothing wrong with me on the outside. There's absolutely nothing wrong to make sense of that pain.
That moment that nothing else mattered to me, that I just threw myself in front of a moving car.
I told my parents what would happen if I wasn't here.
I still had a whole future that I had planned, it's like I was planning the suicide, but at the same time, I was making plans to go out to the movies with my friends the next week.
It's hard to endure, but
it's just, take it one day at a time. And that's kind of how I've been living my life.
It affects my daily life all day, every day.
When I finally did start to think oh, I'm probably an addict, I was like, no, you're just lying to yourself.
I really want to live, and I'm trying to make the effort, and I want to have a good life. Maybe 1, 2 kids, not the white picket fence, but something that's livable, not this. But I want it. And I just want normal and mundane and average. Maybe a trip to Myrtle Beach every summer. I don't care. I'm sick of crazy, chaotic, up and down mess.
There really is light. There really is. I know you're you don't know me. You have no idea of my journey. You have no idea. You're right, I don't. You're right, I don't. But I do know about lots of other kids' journeys. They are very different than yours, I'm sure of that. But what I know is that you're worth it. You have value. You are fighting this fight that you truly have no idea whether you're going to win or not. You're beyond courageous. You're beyond courageous. And you're stronger than you know. So keep the fight. Stay strong in your resolve, because you're worth it.
Mental health has to be among the most important issues facing our country now, and I'm so glad that Ken Burns and his team are taking it on. That documentary will be released next year, spring of 2022. I want to get some final thoughts from our panelists. Elle, as you move on to college in the fall, first of all, I hope it is an open, good freshman year for you. And do you plan to continue the Therapy Thursdays, either virtually with your girlfriends who are in other places, or maybe even with your new friends at school?
Yeah, in some way or another, I would love to continue doing the Therapy Thursdays. Me and my high school friends, I know, will always check in with each other and do something of the sort, because that's always been super important to us. And I'm sure with my new college friends that I meet, I'll make sure to be checking in with them, because I think it's been such an important part of my high school and has helped me to grow into such a different person than I was when I first got into high school. Those social connections just mean the world to me. So I'll definitely be continuing to do that when I go to high school or college.
And what will you major in, Elle?
Right now I'm undecided, so we'll see, I guess. But I'll definitely want to continue doing some mental health related, psychology related subject, something that can bring that into it, because it's definitely something I'm very passionate about. Thank you so much.
Yep, good luck as you move on. Lem, what are your hopes going forward? You have a couple more years of college, and then what?
Well, I mean, I'll be on to grad school. I think that I hope that I can finally, find what's it called? A schedule that works for me, something that I can do to really keep my life all together. I hope that my lacrosse team wins packs. And maybe another cat, who knows? But other than that, I'm just looking forward to the future, and I'm excited to see, how I change and how I grow.
Well, it was great having you, and good luck to you. Nick, as you move forward with your work in schools, tell me how that work helps you personally with your mental health work on yourself.
It helps me personally because every time I'm able to tell my story to a receptive audience, it helps me to reclaim the things that I have been most ashamed of and, tell my story, reclaim my story. And it really helps knowing that there are going to be a generation of kids out there. I've got to say, Lemlem and Elle, you give me hope for better things to come. I have to say that. I am so inspired by you. But you and all those kids that we get to talk to make me believe that one day we can bring an end to the struggle that people with mental health conditions face and suicide and crisis. And we all get the help that we need before crisis points. And that stigma will be no more. It inspires me. It really does.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Michelle, I think we need to say some compassionate things to parents because, the other side of this generation gap are the parents who I do believe do their best. What do you have to say to parents?
I think that first of all, that you're doing great. I think is the first thing we need to say is you're doing great. I know you're trying really hard and it can feel like it's the worst some days. Talking with your kids can be a struggle. But just keep trying. And you're doing your best and we really thank you for it. I don't know if your kids have thanked you lately, but we thank you. So parents, thank you, and you're doing great. I think those are the two things that they need to hear right now.
Well, thank you. And I think the takeaway from this is if you are feeling something, then tell somebody and talk about it. And that is the first step to bringing the wall down. And then maybe somebody else will hear you talking about it. And then that is the path to get help. And I think that's what we all want and deserve is peace of mind and good mental health. And I'm glad to have been part of this important conversation on behalf of the Wellbeings Tour created by WETA. I thank our panelists for being part of the event. I thank NAMI Keystone, Pennsylvania for their longtime support and the audience also for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and your questions. Please remember to visit the Wellbeings website at www.wellbeings.org/WQED-resources to download the free Wellbeings Pittsburgh Mental Health Toolkit. And there you will find local and national support resources. And while there, please give us your feedback on the program by filling out the survey. Let us know what you thought. Our discussion tonight was recorded and it will be available to watch at wellbeings.org/WQED. So look for that soon. And again, thank you for being here. Don't hesitate to talk about what you're feeling and be well, everybody. Thank you.